Welcome. Hello, Pam. How you doing? Welcome to everyone to Wednesdays at 1. Here we are. And we are going to hopefully finish up Genesis today. So we're going to start with chapter 46. If you have your Bible and your pencil and you're getting yourself all ready, just go to chapter 46. And we're going to start there and do a little bit. And we're going to skip that whole big names of all the kids of Jacob's cycle. If you want to go through there and kind of figure it out, you can certainly do that. I have a couple of comments I want to make there. But other than that, we're going to it's story time with Pastor Susan. We're going to finish up Joseph's story today. And then I do think I had a couple of people send me notes and say that they would like to continue the saga of the historical story as it unfolds. And so we will skip next Wednesday, which is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and then we will enter in again in December with the book of Exodus, which immediately follows the book of Genesis. So we'll just pick up that is still historical. There's no intervening texts or manuscripts that go in between there. So we'll just go from Genesis directly to Exodus to finish up the story. So let's take a minute and celebrate this gorgeous day and have a word of prayer. Gracious God, once again we come and gather in your word this day. And once again, there is a beautiful sunshine coming through my window, and we thank you for these last warm days of autumn before we hunker down for the colder days of winter. We appreciate the change of the seasons. We appreciate the hope that is starting to dawn. We appreciate all those who are responding to the surge in the virus with better consciousness of wearing masks and keeping distant. And we just thank you for being with us throughout this journey. We also thank you, Lord, for the gift of your word, not only in your Son, but through this text that we encounter each week, where we get to know you and your family a little better and start to understand more about the human condition and how important it is that you have claimed us for your own. We pray all these things in your name. Amen. Okie dokie. Okay, that gave us a chance for 2 more people to come in. That's good. So let us begin. I'm going to start with Genesis 46 and probably we'll do a little creative editing as I go along, but I'll let you know where I am. The title of this passage is Jacob Brings His Whole Family to Egypt. And as you will recall, last week we had the trickery where Joseph was continuing his genetic heritage from his father Jacob, now known as Israel, with the bait and switch on his little brother Benjamin when he sent the boys back, all the brothers back to their father Jacob. He sent them with grain and the money that they would have paid for the grain, and then he had the stewards slip a golden cup or a bronze cup into his bag, and then went after them to stop them. And there it was, even though all the brothers were like, no, 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 we didn't know we wouldn't do that. No, 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 we're fine. And then look what was in Benjamin's bag, the golden cup. So Joseph uses that as a way to turn around and to try to keep Benjamin with him, who his obviously his little brother, who he wanted to have him with him. So he says, you guys go now back to your father and leave Benjamin here as the ransom until you return. And I believe it was it Reuben? I'm trying to remember now, who talked him out of, just a minute, Judah. It was Judah, one of the elder brothers, who told Joseph, he said, if you keep our brother Benjamin, it will kill our father. So, so basically that talks Joseph into letting them take him with them. So at this point now, he has revealed himself. Everybody knows who everybody is, and he is sending now for Pharaoh has sent carts and carriages and all kinds. He's going to basically pay for the move. And so Jacob and Israel and his family are moving to Egypt, which will populate the land of Egypt with the Jews that we will will be an important group of people as we move into the book of Exodus. So, starting in 46. When Israel set out on his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba, he had offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's own hand shall close your eyes. Then Jacob set out from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried their father Jacob, their little ones and their wives, in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry him. They also took their livestock and the goods that they had acquired in the land of Canaan, and they came into Egypt, Jacob and all his offspring with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters, all his offspring he brought with him into Egypt. Now, these are the names of the Israelites, and I'm just going to hit the highlights here. Jacob and his offspring who came to Egypt. So now we have Reuben, the firstborn, and the children of Reuben, and the list of children. Simeon, the secondborn, and then the children of Levi, and the children of Judah. And then we go down to the other wives and their children. But I wanted to just point this out. So Reuben is the one who tried to keep them away from after the rape of Dinah, his sister. He tried to keep the brothers in check, and was also the one who pleaded for Joseph not to be killed. So Reuben, the firstborn. Simeon, then, who was important a couple of weeks ago when he was the one who was kept in jail. Then the children of Levi. So the third born was Levi, and his group, his family, will be the ones who will be set apart as the priests. He will not receive land because his tribe will be scattered as the holy ones of Israel. And then finally Judah. So those top four, the eldest four, are the ones who speak for the family. Judah obviously intervening with Joseph to let Benjamin go back and see his father. So we see those four elder brothers each taking a role in how this story unfolds and being an important part in that. So then we get down to finally the children of Naphtali, and these are the children of Bilhah, whom Laban gave to his daughter Rachel, and these she bore to Jacob, 7 persons, and then all the persons belonging to Jacob who came into Egypt, who were his own offspring, not including the wives of his sons, were 66 persons in all. The children of Joseph, who were born to him in Egypt, were 2, and all the persons of the house of Jacob who came into Egypt were 70. So they started out with a number of completion, 7 times 10. We got 2 numbers of completion combining together to make 70, which makes it completely complete. So basically, this is it. These are the people of Israel. This is what's coming into the land of Egypt, and from this seed of the people of Israel, we will get this whole tribe, the whole Hebrew nation. So I want to go back just a little bit to when Israel, Jacob, sets out on his journey to come to Egypt. You can imagine he's an old man. He has seen many things. He has seen the death and the possibility of the death of some of his children. And so this is going to be quite the journey for him to make. And so he stops in Beersheba, which has always been important to this story, offers sacrifices to the God of his father, Isaac. And so then God speaks to Israel in visions of the night and calls him by name and he says, "Here I am," which is kind of the basic response. If God ever calls you in the night, that's what you're supposed to say. Here I am. And then he identifies himself as God, the God of your father, and reiterates the covenant, reiterates the promise that he made to Abraham. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. So if or if you're afraid that the promise is going to shrivel up because you're not going to be in your land, don't worry about it, because it'll happen there in Egypt. And I myself, this is new to the covenant language, I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again. So there's a promise here of the salvation out of Egypt. At this point, Israel doesn't have any idea what he's going to find there, except that his son has made good with the ruler of Egypt. But God is assuring him not only will the covenant promise continue and play itself out, but God will be with them, and it will be God who will bring them out. And that's exactly what's going to happen in the Exodus. And Joseph's own hand shall close your eyes. In other words, you are not going to die until you see and are reunited with your son Joseph. So quite the promises that he gets in visions from God. So he sets out and with all of the people, and then there's an enumeration of the people, and it says that all of them who came from the family into the land of Egypt were 70. Okay, so let me continue. This is 46 and verse 28. Israel sent Judah ahead to Joseph to lead the way before him into Goshen. Goshen was the area around, probably a suburb, a suburb of where Pharaoh had his place. So they're going to be resettled into the land of Goshen, which is right next door to Pharaoh's lands, which at the time would have probably been Memphis, where Pharaoh was centrally located there. When they came to the land of Goshen, Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet his father Israel in Goshen. He presented himself to him, fell on his neck, and wept on his neck a good while. Israel said to Joseph, I can die now, having seen for myself that you are still alive. Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and I will say to him, my brothers and my father's household who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. The men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. When Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth even until now, both we and our ancestors, in order that you may settle in the land of Goshen, because all shepherds are abhorrent to Egyptians. Okay, and right across from that in the Lutheran Study Bible, there's a note. This reference may be to foreign shepherds. To stress this point would assure that given Joseph's position, Pharaoh would be pleased to have his family at some distance from the general Egyptian population. This location also may make future escape from Egypt easier. So just kind of an interesting thing that already we have in the Old Testament, not very far into the story, the start of the prejudice against shepherds. And that's gonna carry on, throughout the culture and throughout the story, all the way up to Jesus' time. So Joseph went and told Pharaoh, my father and my brothers, with their flocks and herds and all they possess, have come from the land of Canaan. They are now in the land of Goshen. From among his brothers he took 5 men and presented them to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to his brothers, what is your occupation? And they said to Pharaoh, your servants are shepherds, as our ancestors were. They said to Pharaoh, we have come to reside as aliens in the land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, because the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. Now we ask you, let your servants settle in the land of Goshen. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best part of the land. Let them live in the land of Goshen, and if you know that there are capable men among them, put them in charge of my livestock. Then Joseph brought his father Jacob and presented him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. The Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many are the years of your life?" Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The years of my earthly sojourn are 130. Few and hard have been the years of my life." Few, yeah. "They do not compare with the years of the life of my ancestors during their long sojourn." Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from the presence of Pharaoh. Joseph settled his father and his brothers and granted them a holding in the land of Egypt, in the best part of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had instructed. And Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with food according to the number of their dependents. Okay, so a couple of things to notice there at the beginning of chapter 47. We have the reiteration of what Joseph had told the brothers he was going to tell Pharaoh. And how they were to answer, and then we watch it played out. So here again, we see this. Let me tell you what I'm going to tell you in the story, and then let me tell you the story, which are just little helpful hints for stories that are expected to be told orally. So they're just kind of, it makes the story easier to learn when you're hearing it over and over again. But this interesting thing here, I hadn't thought about that. When they come with their flocks from the land of Canaan, which is in famine, their flocks have made this huge journey, probably on the grain that they took back when they went to get Jacob and the family. So that grain that they were taking back to feed the family had been feeding the flocks and the livestock on this journey to Egypt. And then the coolest thing is that they get to choose, where Joseph gets to choose where they will settle. And he uses the excuse of the fact that they're shepherds and that they will be aliens in the land, that they're not going to plan to, convert to Egyptianism, which they really can't do. But they're going to receive the quality land that obviously has been is still good enough on which to pasture flocks. So that's why in the olden days when people used to say land of Goshen, it was an expression to mean in the midst of famine, plenty. Okay, so they have found a place to settle that is the fertile land, the land that can support the livestock and the herds that they've brought with them. So their wealth will be intact, and that's important that they come to settle in Egypt as immigrants, aliens in the land, and yet the wealth that they have brought with them remains, and so they get to keep what they have brought with them. There is this reference to Ramses, which was a city in Egypt, perhaps named for a later pharaoh who ruled Egypt at the time of Exodus. And I think I mentioned that to you last week, as far as that's probably an anachronism that somebody put in and thought, "Ooh, I know the name of the pharaoh. I'll just slide that in there," as it was, scribes were copying and making these transcripts. It was unusual that a scribe would amend one of the documents, but in this time, this is a good example because Ramses hadn't come. Ramses is 500 years away. So the only way that could have gotten in there if there was a later addition or a later strand that got put into there at the same time. Now there was no food in all the land, for the famine was very severe. The land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. Joseph collected all the money to be found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan in exchange for the grain that they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. When the money from the land of Egypt and from the land of Canaan was spent, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? For our money is gone." And Joseph answered, "Give me your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock, if your money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the herds, and the donkeys. That year he supplied them with food in exchange for all their livestock. When that year ended, they came to him the following year and said to him, "We cannot hide from my lord that our money is all spent, and the herds of cattle are my lord's. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our lands. Shall we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land in exchange for food. We with our land will become slaves to Pharaoh, Just give us seed so that we may live and not die, and that the land may not become desolate. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. All the Egyptians sold their fields because the famine was severe upon them, and the land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he made slaves of them from one end of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had a fixed allowance from Pharaoh and lived on the allowance that Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, "Now that I have this day bought you and your land for Pharaoh, here is seed for you. Sow the land. And at the harvest you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the field, and as food for yourselves and your households, and as food for your little ones." They said, "You have saved our lives. May it please my Lord, we will be slaves to Pharaoh." So Joseph made it a statute concerning the land of Egypt, and it stands to this day, that Pharaoh should have the fifth. The land of the priests alone did not become Pharaoh's. Okay, here we see this particular is probably influenced by the priestly account. You probably knew that. Weren't you thinking that? You were. I can tell that you were thinking that this is part of the priestly account or influenced by the priestly strand. This concern for some kind of historic documentation of how the people of Egypt became basically tenant farmers, that they got to keep their land to sow with the seed that Pharaoh gave them. But then, a fifth of it was going to come back to Pharaoh. So they were paying tribute, and this is going to happen. This is happening over and over again. This is happening from Rome in Jesus' time, that so much of the land was bought up in hard times. And then, so the rich get richer and the poor lose what even they have. But the idea of the fact that Pharaoh's priests could still own their land um, was used in feudal times when the clergy could purchase land, when the serfs, in and around Germany and the, Middle Europe, that this was a precedent that the priests got to keep the land. And so the Roman Catholic priests would say, well, it's in the Bible, we can keep land, we can buy land. And so they became, quite wealthy in the purchase of land that people had given money to the church in exchange for services or whatever they did. Not worship services, but, funerals and that kind of thing. So, so there's that, the set apartness of the priests who can own their land, can keep their wealth, and don't have to worry about these edicts. But then the other thing is this, they get the fifth. Okay, so basically if you're thinking about, there's 5 parts, and we talk about it is a tenth. Okay, so one of the fifths is, remember you take 2 times and you get 8. So this is, but this idea of tithing of a particular part, which eventually in Leviticus is going to get codified as 10%. The tithe means 10, a tenth. But this is the forerunner of that. So we're seeing that happening now. We give you land, you give us seed, and we return to God what God has provided, okay, or what Pharaoh has provided to us. So that idea of offering from the abundance of the field is separate from sacrifice offerings, but is just this is the foundation that will come about with the people of Israel as they start to move and start that idea of the tithe. That everything comes from God, and we return out of our gratitude 1/10 to God. So interesting here too that they even seem to be grateful in their need, that they will become slaves to Pharaoh. Whether that is because they think Pharaoh is a benevolent leader and Pharaoh will deal well with them. I can't imagine people just willingly becoming slaves, even if it means they get to also be tenant farmers. So I'm not sure if this passage actually means enslaving them to live in camps and just do whatever Pharaoh wants them to do, because obviously they have a mission here to become tenant farmers because he's given them the seed and given them instruction. So at this point, um, they are only enslaving themselves to Pharaoh financially, and for their livelihood of the field. It's going to get worse as it goes along. Thus Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the region of Goshen, and they gained possessions in it, and were fruitful and multiplied exceedingly. Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, so that days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147, just a few compared to his ancestors. When the time of Israel's death drew near, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "If I have found favor with you, put your hand under my thigh and promise to deal loyally and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt. When I lie down with my ancestors, carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place." He answered, "I will do as you have said." And he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him. Then Israel bowed himself on the head of his bed. Just before we go on a little bit, I wanted to mention, we've talked about this before, when an oath is made, the two people making the oath, especially most often men, one who is making the oath to the other, to the elder, puts his hand under his thigh, which is a nice way of saying under the family jewels. So basically swearing on your posterity, swearing on your descendants that I will keep this promise to you. And so that's what happens here. And so he swears that he will take him back to Canaan to bury him with his ancestors and not bury him there in Egypt. Okay, so carrying on, Jacob blesses Joseph's sons. After this, Joseph was told, "Your father is ill." So he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you," he summoned his strength and sat up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me. And he said to me, I'm going to make you fruitful and increase your numbers. I will make of you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your offspring after you for a perpetual holding. Therefore, your two sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt, are now mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are. As for the offspring born to you after them, they shall be yours. They shall be recorded under the names of their brothers with regard to their inheritance. For when I came from Padan, Rachel, alas, died in the land of Canaan on the way, while there was still some distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, "Who are these?" Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons, whom God has given me here." And he said, "Bring them to me, please, that I may bless them." Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, and he could not see well. So Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. Israel said to Joseph, "I do not expect to see your face, and here God has let me see your children also." Then Joseph removed them from his father's knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right, and brought them near him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. He blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my ancestors Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all harm, bless the boys, and in them let my name be perpetuated, and the name of my ancestors Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude on the earth." When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. So he took his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to his father, "Not so, my father. Since this one is the firstborn, put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations." So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you Israel will invoke blessings, saying, God make you like Ephraim and like Manasseh." So he put Ephraim ahead of Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, "I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your ancestors. I now give to you one portion more than to your brothers, the portion that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow." Okay, so did you notice? Again, I'm sure you did. At verse 8, after we have had this, Joseph comes in to where his father is with his sons Manasseh and Ephraim, and he says, tells him about, reiterates the blessing of the offspring and all that kind of thing. And then he says he claims the two sons of Joseph as his own sons so that they'll get an equal share with his own sons of the land that has been promised. Um, and then makes it clear that if Joseph has any other children, those will be his sons, and he's to deal with those. But Jacob is adopting, basically for inheritance purposes, Joseph's two sons. And then when we get to verse 8, so we've gone through that little scene, and then we get to 8, and it says, "When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, 'Who are these?'" And it's like, wait, weren't we just there? Didn't we just, so here, that's a great indication once again of a different strand. Okay, we've got a different author and they're putting them both here in the story. But whenever your brain says, "Wait a minute, didn't we just do that?" You've got a different author, you've got a different strand. And you can see at 48 in the first part, we are calling Jacob Jacob. But at verse 8, all of a sudden now he becomes Israel again. Okay, so you can see that one of the strands, probably the J strand, is the strand that is the second strand because it uses God, and the earlier strand could very well be the Elohist strand. So you have these two strands that fit together. You can make it work, but still, if you're reading carefully, you get to that point where you kind of go, "Wait, didn't we just do that?" And then, interestingly enough, in what I believe would be the Yahwist strand, we have more trickery. Joseph puts them in front of his dad, so the right one will get the blessing because Joseph or Jacob can't see, so Joseph figures he can work this out and get the firstborn to the right hand, and whether he did that with any malice, we don't know, but Jacob knows what's going on, and he switches his hands. He crosses his hands so that the firstborn does not get the blessing. The secondborn gets the blessing. And then it's interesting because he says he puts Ephraim ahead of Manasseh and tells him that he also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, the younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations. So Joseph, of all people, should know that the younger sometimes supersedes the elder, and now it's happening here with his kids. So just kind of interesting little wrinkle in there that I think is kind of fun. So again, and oftentimes when we talk about later on in scripture, when we talk about being at the right hand of God, the right hand is the hand of blessing. So if I'm at the altar and I have both hands up, that's a benediction kind of thing. But oftentimes I will, we can just use the right hand. If we're holding a book or something like that, you can just do the right hand, but it's always the right hand of blessing. That's the hand of power. It's the hand you cross yourself with usually. Even if you're left-handed, I think you cross yourself the same way. So anyway, so okay, so let's continue here. Jacob's last words to his sons. Then, if you want to make a list of the 12 tribes, here they are. You might make a note of that if you're ever looking for. Here's what was the birth order of the sons. Here's one place you can pull it out. Then Jacob called his sons and said, okay, now we're back to calling him Jacob. So we've returned to the original strand in this chapter with the second chapter. This 49 starts out with the same strand 48 started out with. Then Jacob called his sons and said, gather around that I may tell you what will happen to you in days to come. So he's kind of going to tell them their fortune. Assemble and hear, O sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the firstfruits of my vigor, excelling in rank and excelling in power. Unstable as water, you shall no longer excel, because you went up onto your father's bed. Then you defiled it. You went up onto my couch. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. May I never come into their council. May I not be joined to their company, for in their anger they killed men, and at their whim they hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He crouches down, he stretches out like a lion, like a lioness who dares rouse him up. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him. And the obedience of the peoples is his. Binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he washes his garments in wine and his robe in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. So we have this description of the great Lion of Judah. And of course, Judah's name will go to the southern kingdom when King David comes in to power in 1000 BC. We're now in the, probably 1900 BC, around there, somewhere around there. We see this great Lion of Judah, who's the warrior, who's the strong one, and it's prophesied here that he will be, kind of the leader. He'll have the scepter, and so the name of Judah will identify the southern kingdom, whereas Israel's name will identify the northern kingdom. Zebulun shall settle at the shore of the sea. He shall be a haven for ships, and his border shall be at Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between the sheepfolds. He saw that a resting place was good, and that the land was pleasant. So he bowed his shoulder to the burden and became a slave at forced labor. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a snake by the roadside, a viper along the path, that bites the horse's heels so that its rider falls backward. I wait for your salvation, O Lord. Gad shall be raided by, that's the, end of one mother. Gad shall be raided by raiders, but he shall raid at their heels. Asher's food shall be rich, and he shall provide royal delicacies. Naphtali is a doe let loose that bears lovely fawns. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring, his branches run over the wall. The archers fiercely attacked him. They shot at him and pressed him hard. Yet his bow remained taut, and his arms were made agile by the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, by the name of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, by the God of your father who will help you, by the Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father are stronger than the blessings of the eternal mountains, the bounties of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph, on the brow of him who was set apart from his brothers. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and at evening dividing the spoil. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them, blessing each one of them with a suitable blessing. You note who got the most ink on that blessing. That would have been Joseph, who got really, Reuben and Joseph really got the two biggest. And poor Simeon and Levi, were joined together. And this is where this is the violence. They were the ones who went into the town and just, he they told everybody to be circumcised, and then everything would be fine. And so then after all the men were circumcised, they went in and killed them all as the revenge for the rape of their sister Dinah. So they were not among the favorites of that time. So Jacob, I think, Reuben and Judah are the ones that probably were the cream of the crop, with the exception of Joseph, who was obviously the apple of Jacob's eye. Okay. Then he charged them, saying I did want to say one other thing about Simeon and Levi. These are blessings. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here that we kind of don't quite get the understanding of, if you're a wolf or if you're a snake, but then bites at the heels of the horses. I mean, a lot of that imagery is kind of lost on us because we don't, if they're blessings, why does it sound so bad? But I think there's a clue here in Simeon and Levi in verse 5, 6, and 7. Weapons of violence are their swords, and he says, God forbid that I should have to deal with them on the basis that they deal in violence and joining their company and that sort of thing. But then he says, cursed be their anger, not cursed be them, but cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. And then says that they will be divided and scattered in Israel. Okay, so verse 29. Then he charged them, saying to them, I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my ancestors in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave in the field at Machpelah, near Mamre, in the land of Canaan, in the field that Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite as a burial site. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it were purchased from the Hittites. When Jacob ended his charge to his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Then Joseph threw himself on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. Joseph commanded the physicians in his service to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. They spent 40 days in doing this, for that is the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. When the days of weeping for him were past, Joseph addressed the household of Pharaoh. If now I have found favor with you, please speak to Pharaoh as follows. My father made me swear an oath. He said, I am about to die. In the tomb that I hewed out for myself in the land of Canaan, there you shall bury me. Now therefore let me go up, so that I may bury my father. Then I will return. Pharaoh answered, Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear to do. So Joseph went up to bury his father. With him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as all the household of Joseph, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their children, their flocks, and their herds were left in the land of Goshen. Both chariots and charioteers went up with him. It was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they held there a very great and sorrowful lamentation, and he observed a time of mourning for his father 7 days. When the Canaanite inhabitants of the land saw the mourning on the threshing floor of Atad, they said, This is a grievous mourning on the part of the Egyptians. Therefore the place was named Abel Mizraim. It is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he had instructed them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field at Machpelah, the field near Mamre, which Abraham bought as a burial site from Ephron the Hittite. After he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. Realizing that their father was dead, there's another one. Like, didn't we just, okay. Realizing that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers said, "What if Joseph still bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong we did to him?" So they approached Joseph, saying, "Your father gave this instruction before he died. Say to Joseph, 'I beg you, forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you. Now, therefore, please forgive the crime of your servants of the God of your father.'" Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also wept, fell down before him, and said, "We are here as your slaves." But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people as he is doing today. So have no fear. I myself will provide for you and your little ones." In this way he reassured them, speaking kindly to them. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were also born on Joseph's knees. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will surely come to you and bring you up out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." So Joseph made the Israelites swear, saying, "When God comes to you, you shall carry up my bones from here." And Joseph died, being 110 years old. He was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. Okay. And there's a footnote right there, right at the end. Joseph transmits the promises of God to all the brothers, anticipating the exodus to come. He assures them that God will bring them up from Egypt to the land of promise, and they will bring his bones with them. So, okay, and the next page says to me, Exodus. So I think that's where we're going to go next. So I haven't seen any questions here. I commend you. You got a week off, so if you want to start reading or read some background information on Exodus, if you're talking about Pastor Susan's timeline, we got Jesus here, and all the way out to here we got Abraham and Sarah at 2,000, halfway as 1,000 is King David. So now we're going to go 3/4. I'm going to use the other hand. So we got Abraham and Sarah, and now we're going to move to between 1,500, around 1,500, give or take. So about 500 years that they spent in Egypt. That Joseph's family was in Egypt before Moses was born. So we got Moses about 1,500. We got King David about 1,000, and then 500 is the exile. So we've got Exodus at 1,500, exile to Babylon in 500. You got Abraham and then you got David. So those 500-year periods, and there's a lot of conversation just in cultural circles about 500-year cycles. And it was funny because I had put together the Pastor Susan's timeline long before I read Phyllis Tickle's book, The Great Emergence, where she talks about every 500 years there's a great emergence. And she was looking towards this. She wrote the book about the time of the Protestant, 500 years of the Protestant Reformation, talking about how the church was poised to go through a great emergence. And boy, she was right, because this pandemic is gonna lead us into a great emergence of being church, with some of the past, but a lot of the future will impact how we gather as the people of God and how we continue to serve the world as the people of God. It's going to be an interesting time. So take a week off. Have a good Thanksgiving. Enjoy. Be safe. Please, please, please be safe and stay healthy. And then I will see you. I believe that is December the 1st, maybe. Let me look at my calendar. No, the 2nd. So we'll be back with Exodus on December 2nd. And I'll put a note in the, in the blast and everything, so you get a reminder that we'll be back together, not next week, but the following week when we'll start Exodus. So thanks for being with me. Have a great day. Get outside, have a little sunshine, get some D on your skin. It'll be good. And I will see you in 2 weeks. I'll see you before then. But anyway, have a good day. Bye-bye.